Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up and analyzing some of the very important economic articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers. For this particular video, I've taken up the period from 18th of February to 24th of February 2019, and the articles that I've picked up will be from Business Standard, Hindu, Indian Express, Business Line, etc. Let's begin this particular discussion. The first article is on the Finance Commission. So the very important points related to Finance Commission are: 1. It is a constitutional body set up by the President of India under Article 280. Second very important point, it is set up once every 5 years or whenever the time requires. Third very important point, the function or the report that is submitted by the Finance Commission usually depends on certain parameters which are given to it earlier by the President of India. That is, in simple terms, in what areas they are supposed to conduct the study and give the report to the government or to the president is defined under the concept of a terms of a references. Now, the 15th Finance Commission has been set up. One of the very important term of reference which has been given to it is the population of 2011 has to be considered while deciding the devolution amongst the states. Now, what is this particular term devolution that I am referring to? One of the very important functions of Finance Commission is to recommend distribution of finances between center and states and amongst the states. I'll repeat the statement. The most important function that the Finance Commission performs is to give a formula based on which the divisible pool of taxes are distributed between center and state and amongst the states. The first is called as vertical devolution formula and the second one is called as horizontal devolution formula. What do I mean by this? Let's say hypothetically, central government will impose and collect taxes such as corporate tax, income tax, etc. Now the central government imposes and collects these particular taxes because it is entitled to do it by the powers given to it by the Constitution of India. But please understand, these particular kind of taxes have to be distributed between the central government as well as the states. Now, who will give this kind of a recommendation based on which the distribution shall be conducted? This particular formula is given by the Finance Commission. Now, let's say hypothetically, in the divisible pool of taxes, 100 rupees has been collected. Out of this particular 100 rupees, how much should go to center and how much should go to all the states as a unity or as an entity? This particular formula is called as vertical devolution formula, and the money that has been allocated to all the states, using which formula or using what parameters it has to be distributed amongst each of the states. This particular distribution is called as horizontal devolution formula. This has been one of the very important recommendations which have been given by various finance commissions. For example, the 14th Finance Commission gave a very important vertical devolution formula of 42%. This has been the biggest allocation which has been done to the states so far by any of the finance commissions. So please understand, the discussion that is happening in this particular article, though is on the population of 2011, all of it boils down to this particular concept of a vertical devolution formula and a horizontal devolution formula. Now, what is given in this particular article? One of the terms of references which has been given to the 15th Finance Commission basically states that when the Finance Commission has to decide on horizontal devolution formula, that is, out of the total funds which have been allocated to all the states, how much funds should be given to each of the states. It has to take into consideration various parameters. One of the very important parameters that it considers is the population. Now, different weightages will be given to various parameters, but please remember this, a very huge amount of a weightage will be given to population parameter. Now, what 15th Finance Commission has stated is, they will go ahead and take the census data of 2011 as the parameter for the population. Now, we have already seen that the population weightage is very high and the southern states have been opposed to this particular kind of a formula for a simple reason. They are saying that they have implemented a lot of population control measures in the last couple of decades, as a result of which they have been able to control the population. Whereas the rate of a growth of a population in some of the northern states again underline the term, some of the northern states has been much higher. The population also has been much higher, as a result of which the southern states are accusing the central government that the allocation to the northern states will be much higher compared to what will be the allocation for the southern states under the 15th Finance Commission recommendations. But having said so, also understand this, apart from this, you must also understand this, there is also another term of reference which basically states that the 15th Finance Commission can also look into incentivizing those particular states which have been able to control the population. So 15th Finance Commission has already stated that it will take into consideration the 2011 population for recommending the horizontal devolution formula, but those states which have a lower population need not be worried, because they may also end up getting incentivized under other term of reference of the Finance Commission. So this is the gist of this particular article. The next article is related to angel tax. A lot of discussion is happening with relation to this particular concept. There is also a short separate video on the concept of angel tax. Please go through this particular video before understanding this article. Now in gist, what is the concept of an angel tax? A startup company will sell part of the ownership of its company and get certain investments from the angel investors. Now the tax authorities basically state that this investment that has been raised by this particular startup company is higher than its evaluation done. That is, in simple terms, the startup is supposed to get X rupees for selling this much percentage of ownership, but what they have received is amount Y. And this particular amount Y is much higher than the valuation done by these tax authorities on this particular ownership or this particular stake of the startup company. The tax authorities basically say this excess which has been earned by the startup will be taxed. So basically this is a concept of an angel tax. Now opposing this particular idea of an angel tax, various startups had petitioned or had asked the government of India to look into this particular issue. Very recently, the authorities have given certain relaxations or clarifications related to the angel tax. Now, first of all, please understand, they have changed certain parameters related to how they are going to call or define a startup. Now, what they are saying is a startup will be a company whose time of incorporation has not crossed more than 10 years. That is, in simple terms, the incorporation means the setting up of this particular company and registration of the company. Now, if the company had been incorporated in the year 2010, it can still be listed or recognized as a startup by government. Earlier, the time period when the Startup India was launched was 5 years, which was further expanded to 7 years. Now the government says a startup will be the one whose incorporation time has not crossed more than 10 years. That is first and foremost important change that has been introduced. The second parameter it considered was sales or turnover. Earlier the parameter basically said since its incorporation in none of the financial years, the turnover should have crossed 25 crores. That is, in simple terms, if your sales in a particular financial year crosses 25 crores, then you will not be recognized as a startup. But very recently, this has been increased to 100 crore rupees. That is the second important change that has been introduced in the definition or in recognizing these particular startups. And the third very important parameter which has been continued is basically the registration or incorporation. It should be incorporated or registered under the Companies Act, the Partnership Act or Limited Liability Partnership Act. So please understand, to put it in a nutshell, out of the three parameters, two of the parameters have been changed in defining what is a startup by government. One, the incorporation time should not have crossed more than 10 years. The turnover should not have crossed more than 100 crore rupees. So these are the two very important changes which has been introduced by government. Now, what is the importance of this particular change in the definition of a startup? It is said that more than 10,000 companies will be recognized as a startup because of this particular change in the definition. Again, having said so, just because you fall under the parameters of the definition doesn't mean that you will be recognized as a startup. Now the government says these particular kind of companies or startups will have to approach DPIIT, and as per the provisions apply for being recognized as a startup. Now, once you are recognized as a startup by this particular authority, you will be eligible to get exemptions of angel tax. That has been the very important concept which has been discussed in this particular article. Apart from this, some of the very important changes that have been announced by the government in relation to the angel tax are: earlier, investments up to 10 crore rupees in these particular startups did not attract any kind of an angel tax. This particular limit has been increased to 25 crore rupees, which will basically benefit many more investors who had invested more than 10 crore rupees and less than 25 crore rupees. These particular investments will not be attracting any kind of an angel tax now. Apart from this, a listed company, in simple terms, any company whose shares are available in the stock market, makes an investment in these particular startups will be given exemption. But please understand, not all the listed companies will be given the exemption. There are certain conditions. What are the conditions? One, the net worth should be at least 100 crore rupees, or the turnover should be at least 250 crore rupees. That is the second exemption which has been announced under this particular parameter of angel tax. The third announcement is the alternative investment funds, which are classified as the Tier 1 or AIF 1, will also be exempted of this particular angel tax. Fourth, non-resident Indians who invest in these particular startups, their investments will also be given an exemption of this particular angel tax. So basically, various exemptions or the parameters have been expanded, as a result of which various industry leaders have already accepted and hailed these particular announcements by the government. And majority of the issues which were plaguing these particular startups have been resolved with these particular announcements. The next article is related to debt management. Before looking at the points given in the article, let's try and understand some of the concepts. The government of India will announce union budget, and in the union budget, usually what we see is their expenditure proposal will be higher than the receipts or income earned by the government. As a result of this, the government proposes borrowings. These borrowings could be in multiple forms, but one of the very important borrowings done by the government is in the form of a debt. This particular borrowing is done by issuing bonds or securities which are referred to as gilt-edged securities or G securities. Now, basic process which is followed is a concept called as open market operations. Under open market operations, it is the RBI which basically auctions the G securities. Please understand, I'm basically referring from the context of the central government. The same process will also be done by the RBI for the state government. But the major difference between RBI conducting these kind of auctions for the state government and the central government is, in case of a central government, G securities will be in the form of treasury bills and dated securities. Whereas in case of the state government, these will be called as SDLs, State Development Loans. So basically, RBI auctions and sells these particular securities to institutions which are called as primary dealers. And this particular auctioning is conducted through a website or a portal called as e-Kuber. Now, this particular function of RBI, where RBI sells or auctions the G securities, or these particular securities are purchased by RBI itself if these are unsold in the market, but essentially the money that is collected goes to the government. And this particular money is helping the government to bridge the deficit between excess expenditure compared to the receipts. This particular function of RBI is called as debt management function. So basically, RBI conducts open market operation to sell the G securities to primary dealers, collects the money, gives it to the government. Now, what if nobody buys these particular G securities, or they buy but still there are unsold G securities? RBI itself buys these particular G securities, gives the money to the government, which it uses to bridge the deficit. This particular function is called as a debt management function. RBI has been doing this particular function for a very long time period now. But in this particular decade, that is post 2014, there was this particular discussion which arose because of an announcement in the budget that whether RBI should be allowed to continue this particular function of a debt management. Because experts say that many a times RBI is burdened with the function of controlling inflation, promoting growth, forex reserves, so on and so forth. And apart from this, should we also burden it by giving one more function of a debt management? That is the precise reason Finance Minister, that is Mr. Arun Jaitley, announced setting up of an authority called as PDMA, Public Debt Management Authority. The proposal was given in the union budget, but please understand, till today, we have not been able to set up the PDMA. Rather than PDMA, we have set up something called as PDMC, Public Debt Management Cell, which is basically an advisory body which doesn't conduct the debt management function. Very recently, the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, has pitched for setting up of a separate debt management office. The argument which has been put forward is simple. He says that we need to have a very close evaluation as well as a monitoring of the debt management. Hence, what we can do is set up an independent authority which will keep on looking at or evaluating, monitoring the public debt of the government. But having said so, some of the experts have already raised concerns with respect to setting up of a separate or independent public debt management authority. The argument which has been put forward by other side of the experts basically is we do not have a very well matured or a developed market for the G securities. Since we do not have a mature market for the G securities, it is very difficult or it becomes useless to have a separate debt management office which is specialized in conducting the sales of the G securities. So basically this has been the issue which has been raised by various experts. But nevertheless, this is the basic concept of the debt management as well as the public debt management authority which has been proposed. But having said so, I just want to make one point very clear here. When I say the open market operation, I basically said RBI will auction the G security. But please understand, open market operations will be of two types. One will be selling of G securities and the other one will be buying back of G securities. And the RBI will be doing these particular functions as per the macroeconomic situation. For example, if there is let's say a higher rate of inflation, or if RBI wants to control inflation, one of the ways of controlling inflation will be by selling the G securities. Because please understand, when RBI sells the G securities, it is basically pulling out the liquidity or taking out the liquidity from the market. The next article is related to labor data. In the recent times, there has been a lot of discussion related to employment and unemployment situation in India. Related to this, very recently, it has been seen that the Labour Bureau has calculated the number of jobs which have been created because of the implementation of a scheme by the central government called as MUDRA Yojana or Pradhan Mantri MUDRA Yojana. Now, before looking at the points given in the article, some of the very important points are: one, Labour Bureau is one of the authorities which is involved in calculation of the jobs data. Apart from this, the MUDRA Yojana is very important because it is a refinancing scheme which has been launched by the central government, which will basically provide a credit to small and micro industries. Under this particular Yojana, that is Pradhan Mantri MUDRA Yojana, three types of loans are issued. These are called as a Shishu, Kishore and Tarun type of a loan. And under this particular three types of categorization, the micro and small industries will be given loan between 50,000 rupees to 10 lakh rupees. As per the latest report, more than 15 crore MUDRA loans have been issued and the total value of the loans is more than 7.2 lakh crore rupees. Now the government says, if this is the value of the loans which have been issued, obviously the people who have taken loans would also have created employment opportunities or would have given jobs to various people in the market, which will basically lead to what? Employment generation in the market. The concept of Labour Bureau submitting this particular report or even measuring this particular employment creation is because of this particular argument. And the government says this will be one of the ways of measuring employment created in the economy. Now, do not worry about the numbers related to this particular report. Some of the concerns which have been raised by various experts related to this kind of a measurement is one, they basically state that new loans issued under this particular scheme doesn't mean that new jobs are created. That is one. Second one, the ticket size under this particular Yojana or the majority of the loans which have been issued under this particular Yojana is very small. That is, more than 80% of the loans issued under MUDRA Yojana have been issued under the Shishu categorization, where the ticket size of the loan is very small. Hence, it is very doubtful that those who have taken loans will lead to or will create more jobs in the market. And the third concern which has been raised by various experts is that very recently there is a trend of NPAs even under this particular MUDRA Yojana, or the loans which are given under this particular Yojana are becoming more and more non-performing asset. And the former RBI Governor, Mr. Raghuram Rajan, has already indicated that the next wave of non-performing assets might come from this particular Yojana itself. So these are some of the concerns which have been raised by various experts with relation to this kind of a measurement. The next article is related to NBFC. So the very important basic points that you need to understand with NBFCs are: one, the non-banking financial companies are registered under Companies Act of 1956. These NBFCs are supposed to be registered with RBI. But having said so, please understand there are various types of NBFCs which are registered with PFRDA, IRDA, SEBI, etc. And since these are already registered and regulated with these agencies, they need not be registered under RBI. And since these are registered under different agencies, the regulatory bodies are also different. In case of an insurance company, it will be regulated by IRDA. In case of a pension company or a pension fund related company, it will be regulated by PFRDA, so on and so forth. That's the second point. Third point, those registered will usually be categorized into deposit taking and non-deposit taking NBFCs. And within this particular non-deposit taking NBFCs, again there will be categorization as per the RBI guidelines. But please understand, this is the basic idea of the deposit taking as well as the concept of a non-deposit taking NBFCs. Fourth, the NBFCs are not supposed to issue any kind of a checks drawn on themselves. And fifth, these are not part of a payment settlement systems. These are some of the very important points related to NBFCs. Now, what RBI has done is, rather than having multiple types of categorization under this particular concept of NBFCs, there are asset finance companies, there are investment companies, there are infrastructure finance companies, infrastructure development companies, there is microfinancial institutions, so on and so forth. RBI has basically taken some of these categories of the NBFCs and has merged these particular categories to form a new category. The articles related to this particular categorization or recategorization of NBFCs. Now, what RBI has done is, it has basically taken the asset finance companies, loan companies, as well as investment companies, and has merged these three types of NBFCs to form a new category under NBFC, that is NBFC ICC, Investment and Credit Companies. This has been done to provide NBFCs with greater operational flexibility and harmonization of different categories of NBFCs. So this is the gist of this particular article. So these are some of the very important articles. Now let's look at some of the questions related to these articles. Question number 1, consider the following statements. RBI manages the public debt of the Government of India. We have already seen this. Yes, it's correct. PDMA, Public Debt Management Agency or Authority, has been set up in 2016. No, this is wrong. It was proposed, but it has not been set up. So far, what has been set up? PDMC. So the right option will be option A, only one is true. Second question, consider the following statements. RBI manages the public debt of the central government and state governments by issuing treasury bills. This is wrong. Please understand why it is wrong. The first part of the statement is correct. RBI manages the public debt of the central government and state governments. Yes, but by issuing treasury bills is wrong, because treasury bills are the prerogative of the central government only, not the state government. In case of the state government, I've already mentioned this, it is SDLs, State Development Loans. First statement is wrong. Second, RBI manages the debt of all the states in India. No, this is also wrong. Why? Please understand this particular concept. The RBI will be allowed to manage the debt of the state governments only if they enter into an agreement. RBI has entered into agreement with all the state governments in India except Sikkim. In case of Sikkim, there is only limited function for RBI in maintaining the debt of the state government. Whereas for all the other states, the agreement has been entered, and even in case of union territories, RBI maintains their debt. So RBI manages the debt of all the states in India? No, this is wrong. So the right statement or the right option will be option D, both are false. Question number 3, which of the following is used by RBI to auction the G securities? I've already mentioned this, it is e-Kuber. Fourth question, consider the following statements. Finance Commission is a statutory body. No, it's a constitutional body. The 14th FC has recommended a vertical devolution formula of 42%. We have already seen this. It is correct. So the first statement is wrong. Second statement is correct. So the right option will be option B. Question number 5. Consider the following statements. NBFCs are registered under Companies Act. We have already seen this. It's correct. NBFCs form a part of the payment and settlement system. No, this is wrong. So first statement is correct, second statement is wrong. Right option will be option A, only one is true. So these are various articles as well as the questions for this particular time period. Thank you. Have a good day.